Okay, so I know it was like 6 months ago in my Gremlins video that I said I'd talk about this one, and honestly, distractions aside, I think the reason I never really pushed myself to finish the video was because Poltergeist was the most traumatizing thing I ever saw as a kid. I still blame my parents for letting me watch it. Now, obviously, unlike Gremlins, which promoted itself as a quirky family fantasy before taking a twisted, cocaine-fueled turn towards literally trolling sensitive audiences with grisly monsters who practically busted a nut for violence, Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist clearly wasn't intended for general audiences. I mean, you have the guy who made this monstrosity attached to it. But since it looked like your typical warm family Spielberg flick, I, along with my parents, naively let my guard down just long enough to have whatever the hell this thing is completely tear the innocence away from me and leave me as the cold, cynically anxious overthinker that I am today. Look, let's not beat around the bush here. There's no introduction needed for what is effectively the quintessential American supernatural horror movie that perfectly exemplifies the genre into one single suburban household, and leaves you with a wild, imaginative impression that will make you second guess thinking television and media was honestly a good idea for humanity. So let's talk about Poltergeist. Before we jump into the film, I have to address a similar confusion like when Spielberg slapped his executive producer name onto Gremlins, causing the notorious backlash of parents thinking their kids could see it. There's always been a long-standing debate over the creative credit for Poltergeist, because since it was predominantly spearheaded by Spielberg as both producer and co-writer, most people assume he directed the film over the actual credited director Tobe Hooper, who Spielberg had personally hired to direct the film because of his work on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the lesser-known The Funhouse. The thing was, because Spielberg was contractually committed to E.T. the extraterrestrial for Universal Studios at the time, a clause in his contract meant that he could not legally direct another film until E.T. was finished. But considering his influence, since the marketing slapped his name all over the film, rumours began to surface that he had more control over the project than Hooper did, which I was second guessing initially because it seemed only natural that the guy who created Leatherface would come up with this idea. Hell, Spielberg himself even openly admits that he stepped on Hooper's toes during most of the decision-making process, because Hooper wasn't exactly the quickest character at making his own decisions. It actually led to the Directors Guild of America investigating Spielberg's involvement, because it was pretty much accepted that he did everything, bar put his name on the directing credits to avoid a conflict of interest with Universal Studios. It's always been a grey area, but in recent years, it seems most of the cast and crew have sided on the perspective that Hooper was the actual director, with some saying Spielberg merely attempted to uphold his original vision as the co-writer and producer of the film. Poltergeist was originally conceived as a dark sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind called Night Skies, which Spielberg developed as a means to stay more directly involved in the sequels to any of his works because apparently he wasn't a fan of sequels, would you believe? The idea behind Night Skies was a group of alien scientists who go to Earth to study life forms and end up terrorizing a family instead, effectively being described by some as straw dogs with aliens. However, due to the busy schedules of Spielberg and everyone he wanted involved in the project, all these ideas were scattered around and used in the concepts of different films like Critters, Gremlins, an unproduced E.T. sequel, and of course Poltergeist, which replaced aliens with ghosts apparently to Hooper's encouragement. Now, final side note for the more superstitious out there were silly rumours of a poltergeist curse that went about following the deaths of 4 cast members briefly after the completion of the series, but just because of the short space of time between each death, and the supposedly unorthodox nature that surrounded it, such as the youngest being misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease and another being strangled by her former boyfriend, people like to make it as a conspiratorial talking point, so there, I've addressed it. Now, let's talk about the actual film. In summary of the story, Poltergeist is about a family living peacefully in a suburban neighbourhood when their daughter is suddenly pulled into a ghost world located within the house. And while attempting to get her out of said ghost world, it's discovered that the neighbourhood is built on top of an ancient cemetery where the spirits are using the daughter's life force as a means to cross into the physical world. While certainly a cliche to today's standards, it was a new concept for its time and pretty much set the whole idea in motion. But what makes the mystery so compelling to me is the introduction to the psychic medium Tangina Barons, who explains to the family that an unseen beast, that childhood traumatizing son of a bitch I showed you at the start, is actually controlling the portal, giving us this haunting monologue that truly sells the idea that these spirits are definitely dangerous and evil without even a single death happening in the film. For a mainstream American horror film, that's quite an incredible feat. It does such a great job at highlighting where the danger will obviously come from, but it will never prepare you for when it finally happens. Like, just take that fucking clown for example. You know good goddamn well it's gonna fuck Robbie's shit up. But no matter how many times you anticipated, you're still never ready for when it finally kicks you in the bollocks. As much as I could go on about this thing, and could just as easily talk about that fucking tree that still scares me, that clown is the ultimate reason why I'm scared to look under my bed. At least until I saw Scary Movie 2, which introduced me to a whole different kind of horror.
Hey, what are you doing?
Uncle Ray Ray's got a game.
Hey, get your finger out of there!
Tickle, 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 tickle.
The general structure of Poltergeist is a gradual escalation of danger, starting out as a weird, whimsical series of disturbances and evolving into legitimate terror that captures that domestic fear of a quaint, tranquil neighborhood being intruded by something sinister that we cannot see. I think I've covered this thematic angle just enough to not have to indulge on it any further at this point, but one of the recurring elements of the film that went on to influence the home invasion formula is the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family. The film sets up all the idyllic stereotypes of a conventional middle-class suburbia and proceeds to suggest all this evil disruption is because of some greedy corporation who immorally trampled over the resting deceased to maintain their major capitalist monopoly. I mean, it seems to be going for the whole symbolism of how this peaceful, happy lifestyle is just a smokescreen to the big, powerful real estate enterprises that superficially cultivate it, but I think it's conflicted to assume that it's a jab at the man when, you know, it's a big budget Hollywood movie. While I get how many people came to the whole breakdown of the American dream perspective, I felt that this was something that the remake was more alluding to, given it was about a family trying to recover from the father's layoff and financial downturn caused by the recession. In that movie, the economic stress plays a bigger part to the father's emotional arc, whereas in the original, given the culture of the time, the father is a breadwinner with a successful real estate occupation. He's somewhat powerful and secure in the castle that he built for himself and his family, yet there's always the constant fear that the fortune and lifestyle that's wrapped up in their real estate can easily be dismantled without warning, especially when an aspect of the plot is the father's own insecurities about being a more authoritative parent. In that case, the ghosts become part of that metaphor. They act as a sort of unexplained enemy, which sociologists describe as a sort of systematic breakdown of the values and traditions we hold dearest to us that leave us disillusioned by society, hence the attention that's given to the father's character arc. After all, he's the one who doesn't take much of the supernatural stuff all that seriously. He doesn't care if it's real or supernatural. He only cares about saving his daughter and stabilizing everything back to normal to find that comfortable solace once again. When the daughter is taken, there's a good amount of time passed that shows how this change has broken the family apart, and it's only when they come together are they able to restore what is lost. I mean, it is a Spielberg movie, so that's kinda usually the plot point he goes for. Overall, I think for all the intense scares and gruesome imagery, Poltergeist is still a very relieving horror film. These days, horror loves nihilism because apparently most people equate nihilism to horror, but Poltergeist is an intimate adventure that celebrates spooky traditions. It's unique in its unpredictability. There's an obscure quality to its creatures that pretty much inspired the Insidious and Conjuring franchises and, well, any other spooky house film that came after it. It's a film that shouldn't be taken for granted in setting a tone that balances impending morbidity with the togetherness of family and loved ones. It doesn't make danger feel unstoppable. In fact, it very much looks to relax the audience after such a chaotic ordeal. It's a breath of fresh air to the madness, and honestly, it's horror films like this that have positive spirits behind them that make me want to revisit them. Poltergeist highlights a universal support and love we need to share, share to get through our darkest and toughest moments. There's solace at the end of a grisly, unpleasant experience that brings us together. So if you want a horror film that scares you while comforting you at the end, you can't go wrong with a film created by the guy who made E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and the guy who somehow found a way to make Texas even scarier. Hello again, thank you so much for watching. I am still obviously in the process of moving into the office. I have not slept more than 4 hours each night the last few weeks. It's been pretty intense at the minute, so sorry that I seem quite phased out, because I usually am, but not usually this much. Please let me know your thoughts on Poltergeist in the comments below, and give me some examples of horror movies you didn't expect to be as scary as they ended up being, you know, something like Hereditary, for example, where at some point it hits like this peak where it goes from spooky supernatural to just like absurd, too close to home, yeah, dodgy territory. Go watch my video on that if you haven't. You'll know what I mean by all those weird noises I just made. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoy what I do here and you want to help me to grow this channel, which is what I'm currently trying to do, please do consider heading over to Patreon, where for just a few dollars a month you can get early access, vote on future videos, get your name in the credits, get bonus videos, and access. You can see I'm on less than 4 hours sleep a night. Get access to our exclusive Discord chat, where you can tell me what you've been watching, playing, reading, talk to an awesome community of people, share your thoughts on all sorts of crazy things, and yeah, until next time, stay safe. I'm gonna try and get some sleep, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.